Hey, welcome back. This is your average esports podcast, episode 31. This time we're going to talk about the majors. First one will be about Dota because that's coming up next week. We don't know if we'll have time to do it before then, so we may as well do it now. And then we'll also go over all the shit that happened in the CS:GO major because that was a pretty fantastic tournament. So let's start with the major and the minor because the minor is also going on, right?
Minor's going on right now, yeah.
Yeah, and I assumed that nothing crazy was gonna happen until I looked at this weird ass team that had this weird ass tag. It's called Flying Penguins. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I look at it like, oh my fucking god! Eternal Envy has created the weirdest stack
He's
of
done it
all
again.
time.
He's done it again. It's a little bit weird because the way they qualify was actually pretty funny if you think about it. Because I mean, I might be a little bit biased because they beat us, but they only kind of beat us because we beat ourselves. Honestly, I think we gave them a free win effectively.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take anything away from them. I do think they're talented because I mean, realistically speaking, Eternal Envy is not a bad carrier, not a bad player, not a bad captain. He's just a little bit off sometimes, or like he's not always 100% on or 100% off either way. But this roster right now, I think, is pretty solid. If you look at it, like Snaking has been a very solid offlaner. I mean, he was one of the reasons I think why JStorm went so far last year in their TI run or in their season in general. I've always rated Francis Lee or F Lee, however you want to call him, highly. Leposa probably one of the better exports out of South America.
Yeah.
And then Rioya. I mean, these are like individually speaking, these players aren't like fantastic, but they're like solid. I think if you see them as just one person in any top team, you'd be like, yeah, that's like a solid player. Maybe it could upgrade it, but generally speaking, solid. And he just took 4 solid players, and I mean,
And
it's
turned it
really all you
around.
need at this level. I feel like so. I'm not necessarily surprised they made it this far, but at the same time, I also wouldn't have bet on them. Like if you had asked me, I would have said, "Nah."
Yeah, I would have bet
I'd
against
probably
them.
see, yeah,
I would have bet
yeah,
against them. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, yeah, I probably would have rated them third in that group. But
Yeah.
right now, they actually made it out of that group as the first place, and now OG and Old But Gold have to fight for the second place.
Yeah. We're both assuming RNG's out, even though I think Awfully is pretty good.
I
Or
mean,
was
yeah,
pretty good. I
pretty
actually haven't
much.
seen him in a long time because he's been stuck at this level. So I'm just like running off of like old data. I was like, man, I remember he was so fucking awesome. I actually don't know if he still is.
I will say that I've always thought Monet and Flyby, or Flyby especially, I used to think Flyby could potentially at some point break into the top tier Dota players in China. He never did. I'm not saying he's gonna do it now, but you know, they're like on paper, I feel like that RNG on it wasn't bad, but it's just like one of those, just another Chinese Dota team that has like Lanem in it, and they're like, yeah, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Last thing I'll note is, I'm even though like I'm pretty down on Chinese Dota in general, pretty sure Vici's gonna win this. Got a dissenting opinion. Maybe Gambit. It's
Um,
either.
I, I I think Vici is the hottest contender for it for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that OG can technically also still take it if they shape up a little bit more. Because I thought their presentation at what was it?
They were
Was
at
it
a recent
ESL?
tournament.
ESL. I want to say it
Yeah, I
was
think it was ESL.
Katowice.
Yeah,
They actually came out pretty strong, and they placed third.
yeah, behind Gambit.
Um, yeah, I feel like OG could take it too. So between OG, Gambit, and Vici probably.
Yeah.
But I mean, never count out Eternal Envy, I suppose.
No, he can't pull it off again. Like if he pulls this off, like even though this is like a
I
lower
think
level tournament, like I have to like reevaluate exactly how good he is as an in-game leader because that would be ridiculous.
the less people believe in him, the more likely he's gonna surprise you. I'm just saying.
Uh,
That's his power. That's his
that's his
superpower.
true superpower.
Yes,
If I make my life an anime, it will become one.
pretty much.
All right.
It's worked for him thus far.
Kind of. He's had one of the most dramatic careers. I'll give him that. I'll definitely give him that. Like I don't know if anybody's had a more dramatic career in a sense. So, moving on. Dream League is next week, right? So I think yeah,
Pretty much. Yeah.
pretty much.
In a week from now, yeah.
in a
It
week
starts
from
in a week
now.
from now.
So I'll just go over this real quick. I think we have the exact same four, right? Virtus Pro,
I mean,
Liquid, Secret,
the
EG.
yeah, the Western Stronghold.
Yeah, the Western Stronghold. Those four. Maybe if NIP is on a very good day, they could do it, but that's like 1 out of 10 chance. And then most of the time they won't do it. Like here's how NIP will work. 1 out of 10 times they will be able to upset one of these teams, excluding I think VP. I think VP just stomped the shit out of them. But like maybe they could do it against Secret, Liquid, or EG, maybe. But like 5 out of 10 times they'll lose to them, and then the last 4 out of 10 times they'll like lose to teams below that or something like that. It's kind of my approximate range for them.
No, it sounds about right. Like NIP will go into a tournament as like a favorite, and then they will disappoint you. And then when nobody has them on their radar, suddenly they're actually a good team. So generally speaking, I don't have too high hopes here at this major, mostly because I think, I mean, again, we have the 4 teams, and I feel like they're consistently better than them. Plus, I see a couple of teams that can always like just upset NIP.
Yep.
Because while I actually think that a lot of these teams aren't actually as good as they probably could be, like if I look at Forward, Chaos, I look at LGD, I look at Mineski, even Fnatic, I think they could be much better than they actually are if they made maybe like minor adjustments to the roster. I think they all have, especially Fnatic. I think Fnatic is actually like a top 6 team right now, and on like in like 10 out of like 9 out of 10 cases, I expect Fnatic to beat them here. Okay. If they ever face. So I don't know. I just don't expect much from NIP here. A 6th place or 5th to 6th place is probably good enough.
Yeah, they're like about top 8, right?
Yeah,
ish,
pretty much. Which is honestly, if you consider how strong the top 4 are and how consistently strong they are, it's really not bad to say that you're a top 8 team right now.
Yeah, especially in the case of NIP, because I still don't think individually they're actually that good.
Not yet, anyway. But yeah, I agree. They're individually speaking, they're not that great yet, and I think if by placing top 8, they're probably playing above their sort of like their level in a lot of ways. But again, top 8 is totally fine at this major if they manage it. Definitely, I feel like it's more difficult to say who, like the other top 4 in that top 8. Like I think we both agree on the top 4.
Yeah.
But the 4 below that,
that's real iffy.
I think it's a little bit open. I think Fnatic is a safe pick for like 5th to 6th place for sure. But after that, it gets super fishy because like Forward Gaming is super random to me because depending on their matchups, they can go really far or they can just like drop out first round. Like that's just a random team in my opinion.
I personally don't really like Forward Gaming. Like I generally bet against them, but they do have like a weird upside that I still haven't given up all hope on them. But like the rest of the teams are like really iffy. Like I'd usually pick LGD, except they obviously have maybe not playing. So I was like, what's the point of that? I guess they could pull NIP like the first major, like, oh look, we're just playing with Sandin, it's all good. But
I'm almost inclined to say Keen Gaming could be a top 8 team at this event, mostly because not a lot of teams know them very well, and they're like, I think a lot of these bottom teams lack a little bit of experience playing Chinese teams, and that usually helps Chinese teams in a lot of ways. Plus, King Gaming has a lot of experienced players with Kaka, 11, and Old Chicken. And they're, I mean, individually speaking, I think they've proven that they're good, right? Yeah. They're just really good. But at the same time, is that going to be enough? I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if King Gaming make like a top 8 run here. Again, I rate a lot of these teams as weaker than they should be. Yeah. So I think a lot of these teams can be like taken out very quickly, and that's why I think King Gaming can make a run. I don't expect a lot from eHome. We talked a little bit about this before the show started, but
yeah, they got Faith Beyond twice.
They got crippled twice with Faith Beyond with Ego. So eHome to me is like a huge question mark. Hey, if they pull out a run, that's great, but expectations are pretty low for this team right now.
No, like literally, if they pull out a run here, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and like put almost all the credit on fucking YAEP. Like you did it again, you son of a bitch. I don't know how you did it, but you did it again. Like that's a specialty. Like just pulling out random shit with players that never do anything after or never do anything before. Like how does he do it? I don't know.
You know when Faith Beyond got injured, I was kind of hoping YAEP would step in more consistently. I was
One
like,
last
ooh,
time.
bring him back. One last ride, boys.
Again.
Imagine if he comes out of retirement, wins TI, and goes back to retirement. It's like, all right, guys, this is it. Nobody can beat this.
I am literally the greatest of all time. Like, fuck.
Yes.
He's right.
How did you do
fuck.
it again?
I don't want to give it to him because he just keeps retiring. But fuck, I'd have to if he did that.
But obviously it's super unlikely. And I mean they obviously chose not to use him. I wouldn't even be surprised if he hadn't played Dota too much lately either, because I mean he's like a family man now too. But yeah, other than that, like again, I keep coming back to this, but a lot of these teams I think are just really big question marks that can be. I think it's very unlikely that they're going to be a hit, and it's super likely to be that they're going to be a miss. Like Mineski, for example, I think there is a ceiling where they beat where they are a top 8 team at this event. But for me, there's so many holes in that team that they can easily just drop out very early.
Conditions that have to go right for them. Like,
yes,
it's so iffy. Like they have to get the right meta, they have to get the right heroes. Moon has to not be a feeder. Like so many different things.
And it's like
Highlight Guy has to be better than I remember him because he was really bad at the end.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't know this. So yeah, if you had to pick 3 teams next to Fnatic in the top 8, like 6, 7, 8, who would you choose?
NIP, LGD, and Keen. I guess those would be my 3. Like
yeah, I'm pretty similar on that. I would maybe put Chaos instead of LGD, but that's because I just really have no clue what to expect from LGD, and I think losing maybe is a huge blow to them.
Yeah, especially.
And I think Chaos is I think they're close to the end of their run with this roster. I think the season is going to be it, in my opinion, and afterwards they're going to have to make huge shuffles. But I think Chaos right now reminds me a little bit of MVP, close to the end of their life cycle. I think they're still good enough to get like top 8, but I feel like that's pretty much it.
Yeah, like right now, Dota 2 is really stratified. It's really obvious what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, and like patches don't really change that. Like everybody talks about the patches and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like the people with the highest understanding of Dota just keep winning.
They do, and it's just also the teams that really stick together for such a long time, where they have like a really strong core at the center of it all.
Yeah, like basically they took what Wings did, except Wings did it by accident, and then they made it better. Like that's basically how I look at it. Like basically Liquid saw what Wings did. I was like, okay, so you're playing this like really free open Dota, but you didn't have the actual like structure, ideology, the leadership to make it a consistent thing across time. But Kuroki could do it, so he did it, and then the rest of the teams like followed suit in a sense. That's kind of how I see that.
I mean, I think the only team, in my opinion, that has relied heavily on meta in the past years is OG.
Yeah, like that. But
even I say that even though obviously they
have like huge roster problems.
They've had like huge roster problems every now and then, or like every season.
No, like 9 out of 10 months they have roster problems. Like it's terrible for them.
So it's like it's not fair to say that.
I can't even count them in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Since the Dota 2 section was short, I was gonna add this because I'm writing an article, or I've already got most of it down, but just wanted your thoughts on it. Basically, the fall of Chinese Dota, where you think it happened, and what you think the solutions are, right? Because you did write a blog about this. I know other people have like talked about it a bit, but basically, like Chinese Dota used to be the apex of all Dota. Then used to be the best. Then it was top. Then it went back to the best. Then it's slowly declined since then until we're at the point where we can't even say they have a top 4 team in the world. Right? Can't even say they're like the best region in terms of depth.
And last season was the worst in the history of Dota for the Chinese scene. Where like TI, what was it, like top 6? No, top 4 no Chinese team.
Yeah. Not last season. Season. Actually, no, LGD wasn't there, so I don't know if you can count that.
Oh, I don't know. Well,
like no, unless you mean the rest of the teams. The rest of the teams were fucking trash.
Right. It was like only one team in the top 8 or something.
Yeah, basically they did the reverse NA. Or like, whenever EG did well, everybody's like, man, NA Dota is so great. And I looked down the list, like, wait, all of you failed except for EG, who made like first or second. Like, this is bullshit. It's not actually make you a good region. That's basically what happened in China. Like, everybody failed except LGD.
And it was especially bad considering how many teams from China were there. Actually, you had IG, which placed last,
Mm-hmm.
or like then they had VGJ Thunder and Newbie, which placed
Pretty
bottom,
bad.
also bottom six, and VG Gaming Serenity right behind them, effectively. Like, I don't know. There's just so many things that went wrong with the scene in the past couple of years that it finally, in my opinion, finally culminated into which is like the worst year for Chinese Dota now. That and I feel like now we've reached a point where it's really hit rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, if we realistically can say no top four, no Chinese team is in the top four right now, and almost you could almost even argue that no team is close to the top four because LGD now lost maybe two.
Yeah.
Again, we might be proven wrong by a miraculous run by them, but realistically speaking, no team is close to being in the top four in China, and you have to ask if you're if you're in the Chinese scene, you finally have to ask yourself, hey, what did we do wrong? Because in my opinion, that question it didn't seem like they've asked that question ever in the past, 4 years. They've
Four or
always just
5 years.
they've just kind of like accepted the fact that, yeah, you know what, we could just get by. And that's kind of like that's the core problem I illustrated in my blog, is that a lot of the players just don't care because they got a shit ton of money through like all these streaming deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
China is like famous, or infamous rather, for having like these obscure streaming numbers, like, oh, 1 million fans are watching like Faker play League of Legends or something. Um, was that Faker? I don't know. Somebody.
Some League of Legends pro. Might have been
Some,
somebody
yeah,
else.
either way, they're like they have like these inflated streaming numbers, and they're like, oh wow, well, I guess maybe I should just stream and don't even need to care about all my competitive, like, I basically don't need to train.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think that's just been sort of like, that's one of the problems. The other problem is obviously that they don't really hedge the bets on actual youngsters, so they're really hesitant to pick up players that aren't proven yet. Like, they're really hesitant. They usually wait like a year until they've sort of like proven themselves in like a team somewhere, or like an academy team, which isn't it's not bad, and it sort of worked at the beginning, but like, it's sort of not catching up with what the West is doing. I literally wrote that in like my article after TI, like, hey, you know what? I can't ever imagine a TI, like a Chinese team, picking up like a Thompson, but OG just did it and they won TI with it. I'm not saying that you have to look for a Thompson, but maybe look for a Miracle, maybe look for an Ana.
Well,
Don't
first
just
off,
like,
I think Miracle and Honor are probably more ridiculous than Thompson.
true, true, 100% true. But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, the West is constantly looking for like these talents and aren't afraid to invest time, like an entire season, to it. Whereas the Chinese scene, ironically, even though they are the ones that should actually be able to invest the time into it, they're like, nah, you know what? Let's just wait this out. Like, um, let's just see how these guys develop in like eHome Z, and then we can consider picking them up.
Yeah, like I didn't like when I wrote my article, I didn't really talk about the whole streaming thing and the motivation thing because I just don't have the numbers. So I was like I vaguely know that's true, but it's like I can't really find out. I really couldn't confirm it one way or the other. Like it's always iffy in that sense, but I definitely think that's a factor. And like the other problem I had was like I'm with you basically. Like the the generational shift in Dota 2 happened in 2013. And basically, if you want to pinpoint the guy who did it, it's actually Eternal Envy. And basically, what Eternal Envy did was he's like, okay, fuck everybody, I'm going to become a Dota 2 pro. And then I'm going to just pull random people out of the hat. And they're going to go on to do great things, and I'm going to go on to do great things. So he's like, okay, so I get Admiral Bulldog, gets kicked, but Alliance goes on to win. Fine, I find Arteezy, I make what was it, Speed Gaming, eventually like Cloud9, like almost all those guys were fucking new, right? And then
Right.
Arteezy goes on to EG, and then EG's like, oh shit, this is the way of the future. You just get these new players, you build a fundamental like foundation around them. So when Arteezy leaves, PBD is like, fuck it, I'm getting Sumail, I'm not getting into these old dudes, right? And so this is basically like Eternal Envy was the first, but eventually his way of thinking actually like infected the rest of the Western teams.
No, it really did. And I 100% agree. That time was like the time where a lot of the pros that we see like dominate the scene right now, that's when they sort of like started out,
yeah,
or when they found their place. And ironically, like it's also the time when NEL was really big. Like a lot of the top players of NA came out of NEL. There's so many reasons, or there's so many things that influenced the players at the time. And like you said, ultimately it was 1, 2, 3 players that were necessary to sort of like find them and be like, all right, let's actually do something with it. Because China has have their in-house leagues too, and they've had these opportunities too. They just never like, they're just like, no, like they just waited and waited and waited, and eventually like, oh, you know what? Because actually at the same time, pretty much at the same time, who also came out of like the in-house leagues? CDEC. That was literally a team, because CDC is the name of the in-house league, right?
Yeah,
it's
but
like
they were
CDC, whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe was also like the superstar at the time, and he was like, all right, I'm gonna build my own team. And he built CDEC. Like he literally put those guys together. He literally built a team that went up and placed second at the following TI.
I mean, obviously he wasn't part of that team, but yes.
He wasn't part of the team, but still he built that core off that team. And again, he built it out of CDC members, whereas the other team, the LGD main team that he was recruited for, they placed like third or something.
Yeah, but like here's the thing. I agree with you for most of the points, but the last thing that I thought was crucial was I went back and looked at those teams, and like in terms of results, none of those Chinese teams did badly, but they hit a ceiling, and they didn't recognize they hit a ceiling, and so they basically did the classic thing that Virtus Pro did in Counter-Strike, which is they're like, well, nobody else outside of us has proven themselves. So can we really recruit these new guys? No, we can't. So we may as well just keep playing with this and get them. And since we're so close anyway, maybe we'll eventually break through. That's kind of what almost every Chinese team thought, except for LGD, because LGD was the first one who was like, okay, maybe we'll get maybe. Like that's their thought process, right? And
pretty much.
And basically, like what they did was they sold their future for that present at that time. They're like, we don't need to develop any of these guys. We'll just keep getting these fairly good results. Top 4, top 5, top 8, maybe a finals, maybe a victory every once in a while. They did that. Like, okay, but as time goes on, they start dropping out, and then there's nobody else, like almost none of the veterans are like good anymore, and they can't teach the newcomers how to play at a top level. Because Dota 2 is like an extremely informational, like strategic based game.
Like, and also, I mean, while that is definitely 100% the case, it is also very mechanics heavy. Like, I think when you look at the shift in 2013, that wasn't only a shift of like new players, but also a shift of making the game even more hardcore on like a strategic and mechanical level. Like a lot of like things that people do nowadays, like that they naturally do nowadays, were sort of like invented or brought into the scene back then.
Yeah.
I recall
funnily by Eternal Envy.
Yeah, definitely. He was definitely one of the big innovators at the time. Certain stacking methodologies, certain ways of blocking creep waves and shit like that. Like all these things, they just kept developing, but they really only happen in pub games. Like a lot of this knowledge is transported out of pub games. Like pub games is really where the shit gets born out of. And you know who gets molded and lives by the philosophies of pub games? Pub stars. And that's, in my opinion, one of the reasons why these pub stars that we've seen prosper in these past couple of years are so successful, because they have that personal experience with these things. Like a lot of the top pro veterans, no offense to them, but a lot of them, they actually don't play that much Dota anymore. Like not at that high level. They don't grind like these 10k hours anymore, because they, they've done that in like 2005, but now they just don't do it anymore. And that's where you see the mechanical difference between them and, like a Miracle, for example.
And obviously, in the last point you have to consider between that is like, well, I guess I may as well go there. Basically, the second point I pointed out, like I thought the reason China was behind is YAEP quit, and like that sounds like a fucking ridiculous reason, but look at all the great in-game leaders the West has had in the last few years. Okay, you have Puppy, Kuroki, Fly, like the whole OG core basically. Fly, Seb, No Tail. You have PPD. who's on the opposite side of that equation? You have YAEP and nobody else. Like
Well,
basically, like it's hard. It's like okay, you want to put Faith? I can give you Faith, but he only did it for one roster.
technically also RTK.
ROTK kind of did it, but then
But
his like skill like died. Like
but
he was literally a bot by the end.
you're definitely right. Like one of the biggest reasons for the Chinese decline is also the lack of like captains, leaders, like actual leaders. And I mean, the West would probably have the same issue. Like if Puppy had left, it would also have be like a huge void, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's definitely an issue. But I I will say that in my opinion, it is also part of the reason why that void exists in China is because they're too scared of letting anybody new come and be the leader. Like PPD is one of the great all-time greatest, but he came in as a freshman in 2013. Yeah, he had experience in Han, but like nobody gives a shit about your experience in any other game. Um, he realistically came in. People gave him a chance. He stepped into EG. Do you think somebody like PPD would be able to get into like, let's say, newbie and be able to like lead a team like a complete freshman?
No.
I don't think so.
It's also why it's also why the newest Chinese newest leaders are like Q, and he was like 4 years ago. Then there's Y, kind of, but like it's but like they don't really measure up to me the same way the Western leaders have. So it's like first off, there's a gap in leadership. So there's so much like that's a huge problem for me. Basically, is there's a huge gap in leadership, and if you have a huge gap in leadership, there's like a huge gap in like team play and strategy. Like I'll give you the fact that shit ton of stuff is born out of pub games, but it takes a leader to take that shit and make it better. Like there's a reason you don't. There's a reason, even though the West has had a shit ton of pub stars, there's no top team where there's only 5 pub stars and no leader. Like it's not possible. Like EG tried it kind of, and they did it, and they completely failed. Right?
No, you're right. You're right.
Like that's kind of my issue is like basically the Chinese don't have leaders, and then the final issue is that even if it's like basically China itself as a culture as a country is just really insular, and like there's nothing anybody can do about it. Like they speak a different language, right? So when you look at like the 5 out of 6 regions, SA, SEA, NA, CIS, EU, like you look at all 5 of those regions outside of the CIS, everybody else has mixed rosters between every player in every region. So they're getting a shit ton of information from each other, including like ways of playing in the pub, including ways of like playing strategically as a team. China only ever really mixed with SEA, and among that, it's only really Malaysian players.
And that's one of the big issues with our language problem, right? Like, I guess also something I outlined. Like, we see one of the top teams that was formed in the past years, and one of the biggest success stories in terms of like forming rosters was Resolution moving to NA and going to Digital Chaos. Like something like that couldn't happen in China. Like it literally can't because they just don't speak English.
Yeah.
And I think it's very stubborn that they aren't looking to expand past the Chinese language. But I realize that in a game of Dota, it's very difficult to play with people that don't speak your language. But I would argue that if you want to be the best, learning English shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, no, I stand by that. I'm not even going to make any concessions on that part. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult. And the fact that it hasn't happened yet just shows me that the Chinese are just very stubborn. I agree that I realize that there are a lot of like complications on that part too. Like moving out of like China to like a Western country is like totally different than moving from Ukraine to the US. Like, you're completely changing cultures and stuff like that. But even like we've seen Western players accept the Asian cultures and move to those countries. Like, Western players have lived in China before, but you would never see a Chinese player. I know that again, it's a cultural thing that Chinese player or Chinese people wouldn't just leave the country just like that. And it's a completely different mindset. But still, if you really want to be the best in Dota right now, I just don't think you can be constricted to 5 Chinese speaking players. that there's a huge constriction, and I can't stress enough how many examples there are of positive sort of like border crosses. Like again, Demon to TNC. That's a TI. That's a miracle TI run that would have never happened if the TNC had decided, nah, we only play with people that speak Filipino.
Mm-hmm. Like, I can understand it because like the barrier between Chinese and English is probably the highest among the different languages. But like for me, the biggest problem with the cultural exchange is like basically they can never trade information. Like for instance, like did you see the Thorn interview with fucking Mad?
I know not.
Basically, fucking Mad admits like if he had the chance, he'd probably trade information with Y or Innocence because he wants to know exactly what the fuck he was thinking when he created that Wings roster. Like he knows what happened, he knows why it works, but he doesn't understand how they came up with it.
No, and I 100% agree. Like, if you ever go to a LAN event, if you ever go to a Dota LAN event, especially the big ones like TI, you'll always see people like him exchange ideas about the game. Like Dota players at their core are super hardcore nerdy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They will not like they socialize every now and then. They go drinking every now and then. Like they still like normal people like that, but at their core, they will still always think, live, and breathe Dota. They will always talk about the game, always talk about strategies, and always talk about like you can talk if I'm not sure if you ever get the chance to talk to Bulba, 100% do it. He can recall games from like 4 years ago to the minute. He'll be like, and oh, remember that like match versus between LGD and like IG minute 10, he does that thing, and then like later on and that's not one game, like multiple hundreds of games they can do that. Not just him, but so many other players too. And they will exchange ideas, they will exchange like thoughts and like that. And that's that's kind of why, and I know this is the point you were trying to make, this is why a lot of the Western players are so much better at so many more things, or they're consistently getting better at these things, because they exchange ideas from like, France, NA, SA, Southeast Asia,
CIS
and then back
even,
to
like,
back to
Revolution came
CIS.
back.
Exactly. They have so many ideas of how to play the game and what things work in terms of like what matchups work, what kind of like things you should try out. Like if you look at these teams, they are a product of all these different teams and ideas coming together because they've all played with various different players before. Whereas in China, they just keep mixing the same player pool. Oh, you played with Lanem before? Well, guess what? I played with Lanem before too. Like you're basically recycling ideas that have been there before, and that's why a lot of times you will see Chinese Dota teams playing so uniform. We can attribute a certain playstyle to Chinese Dota because that's literally what all they do. Because they all, or most of them, when I say all, I mean most of them.
Yeah.
Most of them play the same style because that's the only Dota they know.
Yeah. Like,
whereas if you go to the West, you can't really say European style of Dota because they play such vastly different games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in general they do. Like there are some teams that actually play a bit similar, but
but naturally.
But in general, they have a wider, diverse like strategic pool. Like
Liquid and Secret couldn't be more different. I think.
Yeah,
you can always draw similarities between teams, of course, but generally speaking, you can't just say, oh, we're up against, like we're in a group with like 2 or 3 European teams. Let's just prepare for this sort of like certain strategy.
Like
if you're up against 4 Chinese teams in the same group, you can pretty much prepare in a very similar way for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, like if you just look like Puppy's career alone, like he's basically gone through like four or five different like play styles. Like he used to be super aggressive on Navi, right? Then it's like all win lane win game with All Star Secret. And he's like, fuck it, we're all only playing late game now in this current in the current versions of Secret. Like it's very, very different each time. So it's pretty clear like he's learning, or like the players he's coming in are coming up with their own ideas and it mixes in with his own prism, right? Whereas like I look at China, like initially because there was such a huge cultural like barrier between China and the rest of the world, when China was elite, like the rest of the world couldn't touch them because the informational exchange worked in China's favor, but now it's working in China's disadvantage. So I think like that's something that they're basically screwed on, and something that they have, like. Here's the thing: I don't think they necessarily have to learn English, but if they seriously want to figure out these fucking what these fucking like Western leaders and players are doing, they need to bring like a translator and they need to like start initiating these conversations. Because
I think, yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, because basically that's like that's at least better than doing nothing, right?
I think that's definitely a start, 100%. But at the same time, yeah, those exchanging those ideas at events every now and then is going to be helpful. It definitely is. I remember MVP saying that it was really helpful when they went to LAN for the first time ever, and they got to talk to Loda and all those veterans and be able to like learn things really just by talking to them, and that's how they like they attribute a lot of their growth to that. So I 100% agree that's definitely something they can do to at least get something done. But ultimately, I think they will still be very disadvantaged because there's only so much you can learn by talking to them at events. You still need to, like, if you just had, let's imagine LGD take in Miracle.
Mm-hmm.
What do they learn? They learn Miracle's, all of Miracle's history with Liquid and with OG. Miracle might be a bad idea because he only played with like 2 teams. Bad example. Let's say Kuroki. He Liquid, Navi, Mouse Sports, like all these different ideas from all these different players that he's absorbed. That's what they gain suddenly. Whereas, yeah, you talk to one player, you talk to 5 players at an event. That's like, yeah, there's only so much you can learn out of those conversations. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, like,
and that's why I think if they and that's why I think those teams that did take in SEA players they suddenly were the best teams in their scene because
well, not all
suddenly
of them,
they
a lot of them were.
well
like,
most of
Ice,
them
Twan, Xnova, not Afu so much.
Afu, I mean,
he was for a little bit.
I'd argue LFY went pretty far.
Yeah, they went pretty far, but it's not like they were an all-time great Chinese team.
Then Newbie with KP.
Yeah, Newbie with KP definitely was. But like, yeah, like I get like that point definitely stands. Like, it definitely helps, but like the biggest problem for me with the Chinese is like if you're talking about like learning English and going abroad, I just don't think it's viable.
No, I mean I don't think it's gonna happen either. Yeah, but I think like, if that did happen, I think if there was ever a Chinese team, let's say like a core of 3 players that took in 2 completely foreign players that don't speak any Chinese, and if they actually ever like started to mesh, I think that'd be the most successful team in the world.
Well, it have to be good players.
Like, well, obviously, yeah, obviously, it can't be just like you. It can't just be you and me going over and be like, "Yo, let's destroy the world." Obviously, I'm like saying, like if they take players that are like at the top 8, top 6 level, I think that can be like the best team in the world at some point.
Like,
just because you bring in so many experience and so much knowledge from like all over the world.
Yeah, like the last thing I'll point out to is like the really crazy Chinese guys are gone, or a lot of them are gone. Like, Wings basically was the craziest of the bunch, and they basically played a style nobody ever saw before, right? But I don't even know if they understood what the fuck they were doing. I think so. That didn't really go anywhere for the Chinese scene because like they were such an extreme exception that the rest of the Chinese scene didn't even bother trying to learn what they were trying to do. Like, that's how it appears to me.
I think you can tell that they didn't know what they did. That they didn't really know what they were gonna do, what they were doing, because if you look at their teams post Wings, they've been train wrecks. Yeah, sure, eHome is here now, but it took them a long time to get to this point.
I even think eHome was like basically Xiaowei like figuring them out for them. It's like, here's how what you were actually thinking. Oh my god, that was a genius. Xiaowei's like, oh my god, he's right. Like, I swear to God, I'm pretty sure Xiaowei's the main reason, and that's going to like. See, that's actually, I think, the actual solution is you got to bring in those types of guys as coaches. Like, they no longer want to play, but they can do the draft. They can figure out what the fuck like these players can do, and then they can give them a better idea of what they're supposed to do. Like, I think that's what Xiaowei brings to that particular team. ROTK is actually doing it for Vici, and I think that's.
I mean, it kind of works.
Like, basically, they're playing an ROTK style, which is limited, but it's better than nothing. It's effective in a sense, right? Like, another player I think that China lost that they probably needed really badly was Hao, because Hao was another guy who did have his own like very, very unique thoughts of the game, right? But like, he's gone now, so it's like, yeah, basically China's kind of screwed.
I think it also doesn't help that Mibi and FY are on the same team. That's
What?
like putting, in my opinion, that's like no, like for the overall health of the scene.
Oh, okay.
That's like wasting two captains basically, because maybe even though he might not like the role, I think he's actually a very capable captain and leader. I feel like he just needs like a secondary captain to his hand to actually like lead the team, like in terms of like drafting and like stuff like that. But generally speaking, he's a good leader. Um, but now he has FY, obviously like the best, one of the best captains in China too. So that's like
Yeah, but like
one team snatching two of them.
yeah, but like LGD is another possible solution, but I didn't really consider it because like as far as I know, they do democratic shot calling, which is kind of weird. But it makes sense just because all five of them play like a similar pace and style, so it's like fine that works. But that's not like a viable solution for the rest of the teams because I don't think you're gonna get all five players to be on all the same page on every draft, every hero, every reaction, or whatever. Like I don't think, like I think LGD is like this current iteration of LGD is unique in that sense.
Speaking of, I had this discussion with somebody at the major, not at the major, at Katowice recently, and excuse me, we effectively came to the conclusion that there's basically like what, only 2 or 3 teams in the world where there's like only one person definitely making all the calls, like in terms of drafting, and that's like Secret, Liquid, and that's it actually. We weren't 100% sure about NIP because there are a lot of other voices also involved in the drafting process, but like those 2 teams, like Liquid and Secret, are the ones that without a doubt have like the captain. Whereas most other teams have usually like 1 to 2 sort of like shot callers, or even 3. But yeah, no, with Liquid and Secret, they're definitely the only teams, or one of the only teams that have like a definite captain, and it's something unique these days, I think, to have somebody call the shots all by themselves.
Yeah, like
just of how Dota has sort of like evolved.
No, like here's the thing, like shot calling is a bit complicated because the way people think about it, and the way I generally think about it is a bit different. Like,
I didn't mean shot calling in terms of like in-game shot calling, because obviously that's still something that usually rests on multiple shoulders.
Yeah.
But I mean like being the actual leaders of the team and like actual drafter of the team.
Like when I guess that's another like perception difference. Like, yeah, I think drafting is usually the leadership job, but I also think like being the captain is a bit different. Like I think being a captain is also setting like a set of principles that like the rest of the team has to abide by. Like whether that's like a strategic vision, discipline, team culture, all that shit. Like for me, like nobody like NIP is definitely a PPD team. Like it doesn't even matter like if he and like the 4 other guys all share drafting responsibility. At the end of the day, they follow his lead in terms of how they play the game, how they think about the game, how they prepare for the game. Same thing can be said for Puppy. Same thing can be said for Kuroki. Same thing can be said for Solo, even though he doesn't draft.
No, for sure. I was actually going to bring up Solo too as a really good example of this, because he doesn't draft, but he's without a doubt the captain of that team.
Yeah, so that's generally what I think about the thing, because like for whatever reason in Dota, everybody thinks drafting is captaincy, but I don't actually think that's the case. Like it's like generally correlated like by like what 80%, 90%, maybe 70%, something around there. But captaincy is definitely a different thing from drafting. It's why Boba will never be like a true captain, even though he's probably a fucking genius at drafting and at the game.
Genius
like,
drafter, yeah.
He can. I don't think he has like the specific aspects he needs to be a true captain.
No, I don't think so either, and I think he's sort of accepted that by now too.
Yeah, rest in peace, Bulba. But
I mean,
well, he's still doing well until like Sumeo's like, yeah, I want this pick, and then they lose the game. Yeah. All right, I think that about covers it for Dota. Unless you had any other thoughts about the major.
No, I think we can move on about that one.
All right. So the other thing we'll be covering is the CS:GO major, IEM Katowice. Did you see a lot of this major or what?
I watched a lot of this major, and let me tell you, it was a good one.
Yeah, it was it's pretty high level.
Just to get things started, I think what really elevated this major over others was the format change to best of 3
Mm-hmm.
for elimination and advancing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like watching this major, there was no doubt in my mind about the teams that advanced. Like, I never once thought of a team and was like, huh, you know what? They advanced the next stage, but I don't really think they really belong here. I mean, you can maybe make the case, but for like 1 or 2 teams. But realistically speaking, like I look at these matchups, I'm like, yeah, I feel like they deserve this. I feel like they truly actually deserve this. Whereas in previous majors, it was always like 1 or 2 teams are like,
real iffy, right?
Yeah.
And then they get banged out the next major, like, oh, I guess Avangard really wasn't that good. Get out.
Exactly.
Right.
And then also I think the seeding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though it kind of shafted us, the complexity. I mean, we drew
like worst seed or second
Astralis,
worst seed,
MIBR,
NRG,
and then FaZe.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally played against 3. Was it 3 semifinalists? No. Actually, FaZe never made the semifinals.
Two semifinalists, a quarterfinalist, and a team everybody thought would be good, but wasn't. NRG.
Yeah. So, again, while it shafted us, I think it is generally a good system, though. Because, again, this really made sure that the best teams actually advance. But it also gave... I feel like it gave everybody, like, a fair chance of proving themselves, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I really like this format. And,
yeah. I really like... Did you see the Fnatic... no, not the Fnatic. Did you see the Vici Gaming seeding for the Challenger stage?
I did not see the seeding.
Basically,
what were they seeded as?
No, basically, you know how the seeding works, right? Like, the initial seeding is done by taking the average of...
Everybody else picks... Yeah, everybody else picks them.
Yeah, everybody else power ranks everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And then they take... And if they think somebody's doing a troll vote, they'll just remove it, right?
Right.
And the person they removed was Vici Gaming. Because what happened was Vici Gaming, like, they ranked Fnatic, like, 8th. When everybody else had them at, like, number 1.
Oof.
Or number 2. And then they played Fnatic in the first round, and they beat Fnatic. It was the funniest thing.
Holy shit.
That's pretty baller, in a sense. I don't know if they were trolling or not, but that's pretty baller.
The thing is, though, they might have known from scrims that they were just going to be... That the Fnatic, or at least versus them, Fnatic might not be that great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I just thought it was a really funny thing about the seeding.
No, for sure. I mean, VC Gaming in general, and Tyloo too, they showed interesting stuff. I wouldn't say there was super surprising.
No, it wasn't.
But they were interesting, at least.
Tyloo especially has, like, really good players, except for Summer. Like, I think Summer is just a choker.
I would agree.
Yeah, he basically choked up the entire tournament. But everybody else was pretty good in terms of individual stuff, and they were trying to play, like, European style, which makes me think, like, the coach has, like, a lot of say in that team. But yeah, I guess we may as well just jump to the Legend stage. I don't think there was that much interesting stuff in the... Actually, wait, do you want to talk about Fnatic getting eliminated in Challengers? That's pretty fun.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about it, because that's pretty hilarious. They were actually trash at this event. They were generally trash.
Yeah, they were.
I feel like if you lose to G2, you're pretty trash.
Yeah, that's yeah, basically G2 was so trash.
That's my summary anyway.
Yeah, basically Fnatic was trash this tournament, and they had that really weird statement where, like, we are not changing anybody. It's like, well, nobody. We're denying all the rumors of roster changes, but it's like everybody's like, wait, what roster rumors? There were never no ones to be found. But basically, here's my summary of Fnatic. Exist screwed them in the veto multiple times, right? Basically, they gave Windstrike Train, lost to Windstrike, and they basically did a bunch of stuff like that throughout this series, throughout their run. Individually speaking, Crims is their only good player. JW is back to the trash can. Exist choked the shit out of... Actually, I don't know if he choked. He was just really fucking bad. Because he's usually not a choker, but he was just really bad against G2. Brolan was okay for his first tournament. Twist doesn't fit this series. Doesn't fit this team, I think.
Was Brolan really worth more than all of existing Galaxy after all?
Who knows? Who knows?
I feel like Existence Galaxy might have put out a better performance. I'll be honest. I really think Fnatic just shit the bed really hard.
Yeah, like, basically, like, Crims died for their sins. That's all. That's how I'll put it.
like I feel like if you look at the score, it's like, yeah, could have been worse, could have been better, but I feel like they just played really, really bad.
No, they played really
even
bad.
Even in the win against Greyhounds, like,
it was really bad.
I mean, you're supposed to win this match, so chill the fuck out.
Yeah, like I'll add an additional thing. Like I think basically Exist isn't a good in-game leader. Like I rewatched his stuff against Astralis, and I rewatched the Challenger stage stuff, and basically he's doing very similar stuff where he's doing like these risky calls that don't really have a lot of like prep for them. So like if it works, it works out really well. But if it fails, you instantly die. It's kind of like that kind of weird gamble to it, and he always does that stuff, and it's not very good in my opinion. So I just don't think the Fnatic style is conducive to be a consistent team. That's all. Yeah.
Not right now, anyway.
I don't think it'll ever be. I think their ceiling is like with this 5-man lineup. I think their ceiling is like top 10.
I think it's realistic to say anyway that they're probably not going to stay like this. So
like here's the problem: they just signed JW and Crims to a 3-year contract. Obviously, you're not going to get kick Crims, but JW is not that good. They just got Twist. I don't think they're going to kick him out. Broland is their future. For some reason, they're in love with Exist. Like, I don't think they're going to make any changes.
Maybe not right now, but the fact that they play at the minor, I mean, they're free to make any changes they want.
Yeah, they're free. They're free to make any changes they want. But I'm just saying, like the problem with them is like the same problem with NIP and the Swedish scene. Is like there aren't that many good changes to make if they're trying to stick to an all Swedish lineup. And as we know with Swedes, they love other Swedes.
They love other Swedes for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. I basically lost a lot of hope for the Swedish scene because I just don't think they have any good in-game leaders, and like they're not making these super like Swedish powerhouse because Crims is now like locked in jail with Fnatic. Olaf Meister is in phase. And yeah, there you go. All right. Moving on to a Legends stage. All right, let's talk about your team, Cole.
Oof.
So, where do you want to start?
Let's just say that I think the first 2 maps or the first 2 games are like whatever. I mean, losing versus Astralis was to be expected, honestly. Do you want to talk about the nuke pick?
Yeah, I don't really know what you guys were thinking with the nuke pick. Like if I had to come up with a summary, if I had to come up with speculation, you guys came up with like they'll never expect this, and we're kind of good on nuke. So maybe Glaive will pull a Zeus and not practice nuke, and then we'll be the first ones to fuck, they just stomped us on nuke. That's kind of what I thought happened.
I'm pretty sure that I feel like that's pretty much what happened. Without having been in the actual room when they laid it out, that's as far as I know. That's pretty much what happened. I mean, realistically, against like the alternative was going to be what?
The alternative was you were going to get smashed. I'm not gonna be gentle about this. Like
no,
smashes everybody. Like come on.
Exactly. Like after they beat us on nuke, they were arguably best map, and they only 16-6 us or whatever, or like they 16-0 Call9 afterwards.
Yeah.
Like I feel like everybody was very obvious or very conscientious of the fact that against Astralis you're likely to get smashed. So it was a gamble for sure, 100%. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work out. But if it had worked out,
but obviously, this isn't a movie. You guys couldn't like pull out the fucking most ridiculous storyline of all time. We were the what? Nobody believed in us, but we were the ones.
Let's just say it was a movie, but we weren't the main actors.
You were the side characters this time.
Yeah.
To Astralis glory.
But yeah, that MIBR match is also like whatever. Like MIBR is just a better team. I don't think Mirage was a good map for us right now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I'm not too surprised about that result either. NRG, that's the juicy one.
That's the actually surprising one.
So personally, I think Energy was a good opponent for us because we've had a good track record against them usually. Um, and it's just an opponent that we know, so we naturally feel confident. And then the maps just kind of worked out for us. I mean,
Energy picked Nuke for
obviously,
you guys.
which I think, I think from their perspective, I read an interview, is also fair because they beat us on the last encounter on Nuke. And they just saw us lose against the Stratos on Nuke.
I would have picked Overpass if I was there.
I mean, I 100% would have picked Overpass if I was them, for sure.
That's like that was like the
Overpass is by far our worst map,
and it's like by far their best maps. Like that's what I would have picked, to be honest.
Dude, Shazam right after in an interview was like, we prepared for Overpass, so we were so surprised when they picked Nuke. But yeah, and then obviously we had Cash, which I honestly thought was going to be even better for us, but it was so close because we just made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, and individually, like some of the guys on their team did pretty good, from what I remember.
Yeah, but no, it was still pretty
basically
good.
Ethan and Breezy died for the cause. That's how it went.
Pretty rough. We effectively put an end to their run when, I don't know, Energy, big disappointment this major. Obviously a lot of people had high expectations of this team, and I feel like it was almost good that they went out early, because if they had maybe like stumbled into like a whatever placement, they would have maybe been under an illusion that maybe they don't need any more changes. But the way they've played this tournament, I feel like, the Navi syndrome. I think the way they played this tournament, you could see that there's definitely something that needs to be changed at some point. Like,
they've already
can't go on for so long,
change, right?
I mean, they already made it with Tarek. Yeah, and then just to round it out with complexity real quick, FaZe. Honestly, I know people will say that I'm biased, or some people will say I'm biased, but I feel like we could have taken FaZe. I mean, it was 16-14 on Dust 2. Dust 2 literally is a...
you were...
Like, we gave away rounds.
I'll say this. In this singular instance, yes, you could have beaten FaZe. If you like rerun it over and over again, I'd probably still favor FaZe most of the time. But 100%. In this singular instance, yes, you were close to taking out FaZe.
No, I 100% agree. Generally speaking, I would have also I would subscribe to FaZe being the absolute favorite of that matchup. And if we played 100 times, we'd probably even get smashed 2-0 a couple of times, because FaZe would not make these mistakes ever again. But we had them so close after that. After we pushed them to the edge effectively, I felt like we had them really close, and it really just came down, I think, a little bit to nerves.
No, really came down to the fact that Nico stopped in-game meeting and started killing people.
He's like, "All right, guys, shut the fuck up for a second. I just need to carry this round real quick," and then he did.
Yeah, he did it. He didn't just do it for one round. He did it like 8 rounds.
I know.
It's like, what the fuck is this? I can understand why you think you were close, but like at the very end of the day, like that's kind of what Nico does.
True.
Like it's hard. It's true. Like I'll say, like in that instance, you're very close, but like Nico is Nico. It's hard to like deny him that.
Realistically speaking, though, and that's kind of the sad part about it all. If we had beaten FaZe, I think our next opponent would have been Vitality based on the ratings or based on the ranking.
Oh, Vitality is bad, but
exactly. And I think we could have honestly made Legends again, but I mean that's like a lot of what ifs. So that's
like way too many what ifs.
Yeah, there's no point in speculating here. But still, it was I thought at least it was a good run from our team, especially considering that we've only been together for like a month and a half at that point.
Yeah.
And I say it together, but realistically speaking, the team has only been playing together for like 4 weeks. They've had like 2 weeks where they played IEM Power and E-League and had a couple like scrims and practice between those and before those, and then they had like that boot camp for like 2.5 weeks or whatever. Actually, only like 2 weeks almost, or 1.5 weeks. So realistically speaking, they didn't have much time together. So already really good what they accomplished. So.
All right, you don't have to answer this next question, but do you think this is going to be the 5-man going forward?
I mean, I can't answer it because we actually just talked about it in press conference or like weekly show.
You guys did? Okay.
I mean, I think the team wants to stay together, but it really just comes down to nothing right now. Nothing like. I don't think we've ever made it a secret that nothing has had a contract with us.
Yeah, it's like a temporary thing. Like
he's like a temporary stand-in because he basically just came in to just help us out.
Yeah.
And spoiler, but this is something that Jason Lake mentioned in our show. So if you want to watch it, check it out. But I'm also going to mention it now. I think his contract ends like next week or whatever, like his official contract with us.
Okay.
So it really is just up to him if he wants to extend it. Well, not just up to him, but it's also like obviously if we can come to like a mutual agreement on like what needs to be done. Because realistically speaking, if he doesn't choose to compete, he can just like make a shit ton of money as like an entertainer, influencer, streamer, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you saw that Intel ad with him.
Yeah.
Imagine how much money he got for that one. I'm just like I could totally understand if he doesn't want to compete, but I think he still wants to, just based on what I've seen from him so far. So the signs point towards maybe we can work something out, but yeah, it's really difficult. It's too early to tell right now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I say it's too early to tell, but it probably will happen in like a week and a half, because again, his contract is up and we kind of have to play tournaments
no matter what,
now.
he has to make his choice.
Yeah. So we'll see.
I will say this run was predicated a lot on the fact that Stanislav like was fucking crazy, like really fucking crazy. Like
it's incredible. He's the most impactful IGL in game, I think, in terms of like frags.
Yeah, well, in NA, like I'm gonna go ahead and put Glaive above him for various reasons.
Oh yeah, well yeah,
but yeah, in NA he's probably the most impactful leader right now. He has like ridiculous fragging power. And
dude, he carried. He didn't want to lose. He didn't want to lose.
Yeah, basically saved you guys on nuke. It was like ridiculous. Yeah, I'll give him credit for that. It's like that was like a ridiculous performance.
45 frags.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, it was a godlike performance from him.
He had the highest ADR in that server.
Yeah, he had like ridiculous ADRs. He had ridiculous impact, ridiculous fragging numbers. Also in-game leading. So it was like, that's a weird thing about Stanislav. Is like when I'm looking back through his career, it does feel like his best form was when he was in-game leading, when he was on Optic, and then I guess not as much as Liquid, but then he got way worse on Liquid when he wasn't in-game leading, and then now he's in-game leading again, he's better again. So, kind of a strange player in that way.
Yeah, and I think it also a lot depends on like his surroundings. I know that. I mean, again, I'm saying this because I know that this is already out there, but Rambo did an interview with HLTV. I'm not sure if you read that one. But one of the reasons why, we parted ways with him is that, him and Stan had different ideas of how to sort of like,
how to run the team.
How to run the team, like how to prepare for matches as well. Stanislav is very much, he puts a lot of focus and emphasis on improving yourself and the team and like your own strategies versus anti-stratting. Like preparing for the opponents and like doing stuff that to counter explicitly their strats. So
yeah, and like
I don't know, I think
they also have like really fundamentally, like there was another one he did, I forget who it was with, but basically Rambo's like, okay, so the main difference between him and Stanislav was like he wanted to do more. He wanted to put in more structure and protocols, Rambo, because basically during the time Rambo was there, you guys had a lot of younger guys.
Mm-hmm.
So and Stanislav wanted more individual like choices for the team, and Rambo was like, listen, I understand your point, but we have like younger players who just don't have that in them yet. That's kind of where the difference fell, and then that actually makes complete sense looking from the outside, because since that moment after, you guys have slowly removed all the young players, and you guys got in more older veterans who can play more.
People that already know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Yes. And
so that's kind of how I saw it. So yeah, we'll have to see. Like, I don't really think this is the correct like 5 for complexity, but at the same time, like the major one is good. I think you definitely have to keep Stanislav for certain, and then after that it's up in the air as to where you go. It really depends on who you can get and who's out there, who's rising up and stuff like that. So yeah,
no, I agree, and it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of difficult right now because it's like like you can just feel like a major shuffle sort of like starting, but at the same time nothing big has happened yet, so It's like, is the shuffle really coming? Is it not coming?
Well, somebody
Who's
needs
going
to
to be
get
available?
Kerrigan.
Well, I mean, that's the thing though. Like he like, isn't his team already decided anyway? Like I feel
Uh,
like he's already. I know he tweeted just recently, but like, oh, where should I go? But I almost want to say it was decided at that point already.
Mouse probably
Um,
seems like the most likely choice.
Either way, I just think that it's, and this goes for any team really. It's just really difficult to make like hardcore plans right now because like there's so much indecisiveness and like, all right, are we gonna like completely revamp our team? Are we not? Um,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. Let's go over the rest of these real quick. NRG disappointment. G2 not that good. They already changed rosters. Hellraisers is trash, and they already like disbanded like a shit ton of people. Big, really disappointing. I don't know what you thought of them. I thought they were fucking bad.
They were really, really bad. I can only repeat myself again. If you lost to G2 during this major,
You were trash.
you were fucking bad.
Yes.
Nothing against G2, but actually a lot of things against G2.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're actually pretty bad if you lost against G2 at this major, and hey, big is in that category. It's so weird because you honestly after their roster change for big, you would think they would be such a much better team.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, they wouldn't drop off that significantly. But oh boy.
Yeah, like I'll have to reevaluate exactly what I think of God B. Like I still think he's a good in-game leader, but he might be too controlling. Like I don't really know. It really depends on how that Smooya thing went down, because I feel like that was really crazy of a move. And apparently, like it might not have been all Smooya's choice. Could have been on the big side also. Like if they decided to like, I don't know exactly how it went down, but if they decided to kick him out of the major before the major started, then I gotta say like a lot of the responsibility for the major failing is on the team.
I mean, let's be real here. I do think that Smooya didn't want to be in that environment anymore, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's also one of the reasons why he said that he left the team. But you don't just leave a team just before a major like that. Yeah. So I definitely think something must have happened within the team that caused him to not want to be part of that team anymore. Probably they didn't want him part of that team anymore either.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, I wouldn't be surprised if something happened on big side too, and that's one of the reasons why he had to leave or why he left.
Yeah.
And their replacement obviously was an emergency.
Yeah.
It was an emergency. Nothing against Nex, but he's just not.
He was never that guy.
And he definitely wasn't at this major.
Yeah. Well, I'll also point out, I guess one last thing for Big is the meta was not good for them, just because double ops are out, Augs are in, and if you play the Aug, you have to actually take fights with your worst players, and like the whole thing about Big's double op style is it let them hide God B and Tizian to a certain extent, so they never had to get into firefights, and that's kind of why they got away with a bunch of stuff. They got away with like less skilled individual players because like Nex, God B, and Tizian don't really have to fight on the CT side as much, but in the Aug meta they do, then they die. So that's another thing to keep in mind. All right, Avantgarde, they're pretty good overall. Not that many thoughts about them. What do you think?
They weren't bad. I think they showed a lot of promise actually, and I think I think it's good that they didn't get Legends because I feel like that could have been another Hellraiser situation where they just like, oh, I guess we're just gonna fuck around for like half a year now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I think they're already invited to like an event. Like I want to say they just got invited to like DreamHack Open Rio or something. Yeah, so I think this is like a solid sort of like almost tier 1 team in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I'm just looking. I look forward to more performances from them. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. The guy who really stood out to me was James, Opera and in-game leader. So another member of the Fallen school, I guess.
All right. Oh damn! Really?
Yeah, he's the Opera and in-game leader of the team.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, they basically play like a really passive style, but it's generally structured. But that also means like they become really cowardly they become really cowardly under the pressure. Like basically that's what happened to them in I think it was like a Tyloo game in the challenger stage, where like on Inferno, like they were about to hit the B site, but instead they all slowed down and like they all just looked around, and then like somebody did like 8 or 9 repeats of the op, and they died. It was like something really stupid like that. Basically, like these guys, like it's acceptable because almost all of them are rookies to this major, or maybe all of them are. But basically, like their style of play is like really passive, and it kind of gets to them in their head when like the clock runs down. So we'll have to see how that develops going forward. It's also why I think they lost to Enk at the very end, because even though they were playing pretty good throughout the major, by the end, like or the end of the Legends run, like they lost Liquid, they won 2, then they lost 1, and then they go to elimination. Like the difference between them and Enk is like Enk was already at elimination to start with after they lost the first 2, so they were mentally stronger by the time they met up, and I thought that was like one of the critical differences between them and Vanguard at that juncture. So yeah, an inexperienced team that probably needs to play more.
And again, this is why I think this is good that they didn't make Legends, because I feel like if they had made Legends, this is like almost like an excuse not to like do anything for half a year for a lot of teams, and like get away with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, no.
Yeah.
I look forward to them sort of either rising to the challenge or we'll see the decline. But either way, we're going to see something from them. So that's good.
Cloud9, they pubbed their way to 2-3, basically.
Pretty much.
Shoutouts to Flusha, did really good considering his personal circumstances. Automatic was pretty good with the op. Kiyoshima is their best player. And that about sums up the Cloud9's run.
I'm honestly just happy to see Kiyoshima back again.
Kiyoshima's amazing, man. Like, I'm still super tilted that none of the French teams wanted him. It's like, come on. All of you need him. All of you need him. But what can you do? What can you do?
Well, they can just sit in mediocrity for like another 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe then they will realize, hey, maybe we need actual good players in our teams and not just best friends.
Yeah. Speaking of mediocrity, Vitality also went 2-3. Zaiwu is pretty good. He isn't like Simple Level Truth, obviously, because Simple Level Truth would have had him in. He would have been fucking crazy if he was Simple Level Truth, but he wasn't. Apex was really good in this tournament at times. NBK was really good in this tournament at times. So what's that tell me? It tells me they had 3 pretty good players in this run, but they somehow went 2-3. So it's probably a problem with their tactics and team play. And when I look at that, it's like their team play isn't that great. Tactically speaking, like for whatever reason, NBK thinks he's happy. Like I don't like, this is the thing that tilts me the most about the French teams. They all accept the fact that Happy is outdated, and they've removed Happy from all their teams. But after they kick him out, they play Happy style CS. It's like, what the fuck? Like, what happened? Like, where was the disconnect here? Yeah. And then beyond that, the other problem is like they don't understand how to play against the AUG. Because basically the way they think about the game is like, we'll take this area, we'll take a fight. But then if we lose that fight, we'll have a guy on the other side of the map play like second contact and try to take that area in response. But what happens in the AUG meta is the guy who takes the second like duel across the map runs to an AUG angle and dies. So it's like, what were you thinking?
You know, as somebody that, as somebody that comes from Dota, where a game that has monumental meta shifts every now and then, where the game really changes completely, I'm actually very happy to see the AUG in the game, because like as much as I don't like the gun itself, I just like the fact that it kind of like shows which teams are like willing to adapt and which teams are just way too stubborn to adapt or not capable of adapting.
Yeah.
Like I think FaZe is also one of those teams. Nico tweeted out. Was it Nico that tweeted it out? Like basically saying that AUG is just like
AUG noob gun.
You don't have to AUG noob gun or whatever. Yeah. And it's that mentality. I'm not saying that's one of the reasons why they're like not performing at the top level or like why they're not like a
It's
top
one of the
15.
reasons, though.
It is one of the reasons though. Yeah, it is one of the reasons, and it kind of makes me happy that the gun is in the game because it's just, I mean, it could be any gun really, but the thing is like there aren't that many guns in the game that are like vastly new that will reinvent the wheel suddenly. And the AUG for the first time, in my opinion, kind of like does that. I know that there's been like a couple like those like pistols that had like heavy influences on the meta, like the CZ, the Tech 9.
Like,
but in my opinion, that's like kind of whatever because realistically, you're only gonna quote unquote you're only gonna see that in like Force Buys.
Yeah,
like,
it basically just makes the Force Buy a lot stronger.
Exactly, and it like shifts the meta that way. But this kind of like shifts like the whole buy dynamic completely.
Yeah, basically like going for op is now better than going to op 3 rifles, which was what was happening before.
And
yeah, go ahead.
No, and this just makes me happy to see that teams have to adapt to it. If they don't adapt to it, they're gonna die. And it's just like, for me, this kind of like proves which teams are actually truly the best, not just the ones that like had the skill ever since they've been like 6 or whatever, but actually have to now relearn the game a little bit. Yeah. Obviously not like completely, but just a little bit enough to like sort of be able to say, hey, either we worked on this or we didn't.
Yeah, like the interesting thing about the AUG is like here's my thing about it. Like, I'm not actually a true AUG hater like most people. Like, my problem with it is like it's a bit too easy to use. Like, I don't mind the fact that like it gives CTs like better duels at long range. My problem is that like the ease with which like CT players can use it. Basically, like it's not a high skill gun. Like, if it was a higher skill gun, I'd be like, this is sick. Like, I don't.
No, I agree. I agree, but again, the fact that it is just like it changes it up makes me happy. Yeah. I fully realize that there are like a lot of like definitely still negative things about the gun.
Yeah.
And I do want to see it changed, but I kind of do hope that it stays in the game for a little longer just to see if at the next major anybody's gonna like more teams are gonna adapt to it or not.
Yeah, like like everybody thinks the AUG is like, actually I don't know if they think. I think they're just hoping. It's a bit different. Like, a bunch of the pros are hoping that their AUG is going to change. I don't think so, because from my experience with Valve, like, the thing that makes them change a gun is if it's so wretchedly broken and the AUG has yet to reach that level, or if like the casuals like completely abandon the other guns and they don't do that. So there you go. I think the AUG is going to be like this for a while.
Which I'm again totally fine with.
Yeah, like it's whatever. Like it's not that big of a deal for me because I think you can still beat it with. I know you can. You can beat it tactically pretty easily. Not easily, but like it's possible. It's not impossible. It's not like this Boodle or Fester shit. So yeah. Moving on, I guess, to the playoffs. So which one of these teams do you want to talk about first?
Could probably talk about the.
I guess we'll talk about the most disappointing first. Get the trash out of the way.
Get the trash out of the way. FaZe,
yeah. So where to begin with FaZe?
Where to begin with FaZe? I mean, they almost lost to us, so
yes,
I feel like that. I think that was the first indicator that this team at this major anyway was.
Well, I mean, they got to the point they had to play you guys too. That's another indicator.
True. No, you're right. You're right. But those were best of ones. There's like a case to be made. Like best of one is like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they. I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this going into the major, but like they did this to themselves.
Again, yeah.
Somewhere Kerrigan is probably smiling. I would assume so. Anyway.
Like there's a part. He's a compassionate guy, but there's a part of him that's petty. Like I'm if you pause on a like 15-0 against Fnatic, there's a part of you that's petty. I'm pretty certain.
Well, for sure.
But yeah, I'm sure. Like the entire problem with FaZe is like they didn't diagnose the actual problem with their team. Like when I look at their team, like I basically think Kerrigan actually did the exact right thing he was supposed to do with that roster. He pushed it to its limit, and at that point, if the limit isn't good enough to become the best in the world, you need to fundamentally change the identity of the team. And if it was up to me, I'd be like, okay, you keep Kerrigan, you keep Nico, and you keep either Olaf Meister or Guardian, depending on your feeling on who you think was better, and then you kick the other two and get two other players in, and then the players I'd get will be like fundamentally different types of players. Like one of them would be like NBK, with the other guy would be like I don't fucking know, Oscar or some shit, like something weird like that, right? But you had to fundamentally change the identity of the team that way. Instead, what FaZe thought was, man, we're all sick. We're all the sickest star players. But you know who isn't a 6-star player that's putting up numbers all the time? Kerrigan.
Where's your highlight reel, bro?
Yeah. And then they kicked him out, and they made Nico self-appointed himself the in-game leader, and Nico is like the worst in-game leader, it feels like. Because, like, actually, he might be the worst. Just because, like, when I'm looking at the way he's doing the system, he's basically put these guys in like this weird structured system that none of them are good in. And so like you see like Nico Sports 2.0, because Nico Sports 2.0 makes sure that none of his players succeed. Like what? Like what's going on?
Unfortunately for FaZe though, I think they also suffer under the heavy influences of the Navi syndrome, because as beaten as they might see them, or as bad as they might see them, I mean, they still made legends, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty disgusting.
I feel like there's a very real chance they just won't change anything with this roster, and just be like, well, we're good enough, boys, aren't we?
Yeah, they have to hit rock bottom at some point, and then they'll start doing changes to be like, oh, if Master's like, you know what, I really am a Swede after all. Let me go back to Sweden. Some bullshit like that.
That scene from OWL World Cup where Monte Cristo's tearing off his shirt.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, I'm American, boys. That's just Olaf Meister now. Yeah. And then he's like, no, fuck it, I'm Sweden actually.
Yeah, like it's like that. Basically, like FaZe like they're playing a lot more set stuff, and like I don't think it's actually gotten them better than they were where they were before. I think there's a limit to that level of improvement. So they're not really like basically this like all of FaZe's problems, and technically one of their greatest strengths all lie in Nico. So until he changes his mind, I don't think they're going anywhere. Yeah. The other disappointing team, NIP.
Well, you say disappointing, but at the same time, I personally didn't have high expectations for this team in the top 8 anyway. So I was like, eh.
Yeah, but
plus they faced Astralis, you know. It's like I know they got like what 16-1 or 16-3 or something.
16-2, yeah.
16-2, yeah, that was it.
No, my problem with NIP is like they're really overrated, which isn't really their problem. It's just my problem with their fans. Like I don't think this is that good of a run for NIP.
Oh, I don't think so either.
Yeah,
but you know.
And then I basically looked through their last like 8 or 9 tournaments, and basically it's exactly as you'd imagine. They can't win a single best of 3 against a good team. So MIBR, Mouse, Navi, Astralis, Liquid, any of those. They can win best of 1s, but they also lose a bunch of best of 1s. And
they can win best of 1s, but yeah,
basically like they've improved to where they were before, but this roster has hit their ceiling really hard, and they need to make a change. And it could be anybody, but like the first choice you got to think of is Dennis. The second choice you have to think of is Get Right. Third choice you have to think of is Forrest. Like those are 3 guys I'd considered moving out, but because it's NIP, I don't think they will. Like maybe they'll move out Dennis, but I don't ever see them kicking out either Forrest or Get Right.
I don't think so either. That's just like NIP, the org just wouldn't do that. Yeah. So you know.
Yeah. So like I think they're inherently limited. Also, the fact that like Sweden has no in-game leaders also hurts them. Because I think Lekro's already like suffering enough. Like his individual skills getting worse over time as he in-game leads more. But like they don't have a choice. They have to have him do it because nobody else can do it.
Sounds like a Chinese Dota problem.
Yeah, very similar to Chinese Dota. And yeah, there's actually extraordinarily similar. They also have the same problem of like they didn't bring any of the youngsters up really fast. So like the time to do it was like back in 2014, 2015. and here we are. They haven't done it until like 2017, 2018. So I was like, you were you're a few years too late on that trigger.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. All right, so on to better news, or on to us other eliminated teams. Let's see here. Renegades?
Renegades, I mean, I think they outperformed everybody's expectations.
Yeah.
They did really well at this event. Like, losing 2-0 against MIBR, considering how good MIBR looked at going into it, isn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I think looking at their run, though, realistically speaking, the only respectable opponent they beat convincingly, I think, it was ENCE.
No, yeah.
Well, I mean, they had convincing wins overall, but at the same time, like, if I look at the teams that they played, it's also just like, you beat Vitality.
Like, they technically beat FaZe, but it's like, do we really count
FaZe? FaZe is really weak at this event.
They beat NIP, Vanguard. Like, yeah, they beat some good.
I think if anything, they showed that they're definitely above or at that tier for sure, and they're like close to being like a top tier one, or like not a top tier one, but like a tier 1 team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I say close because realistically speaking, this is just one event, and I can't help but keep repeating this, even at TI and stuff. It is just one event. You can't just overrate one event.
Yeah.
So I think this is like cool, and I look forward to like future performances. But realistically speaking, this was just one event.
Yeah, like here's my thing. Like, I'm doing a buy and sell, and I put Renegades on the buy list. And the reason
I could buy into them.
Yeah, and the reason I did that is because the way they ran through this major was, like, think about the rest of the teams generally at that level outside of ENCE. Hellraisers, how do they win? Woxic and Insta go ham. Okay. What other teams? G2, how do they win? Kenny S and Shocks go ham. Okay. Vitality, how do they win? Zywoo and Apex, or Zywoo and NBK go ham. Like, NRG, how do they win? Ethan, Breezy, and Cirque go ham, right? Like, how does Renegades win? You win off of team play and tactics. Like, what the fuck? Did you not get the memo? Like, you're only allowed to win with like star young players going ham? Like, what is this? And basically, that's why I'm buying into them, is because, like, when you look at their run, nobody went super ham. Like, JKS had a very good event. I'll give you that. Like, general, all their players had pretty good event. But in terms of, like, their average performance, it's not that different from usual. It's, like, about what you'd expect from this level of team, these level of players. But they made it through through fairly convincingly. Like, I think in terms of map pool, they actually play a shit ton of maps. They basically play 6 out of the 7 maps. The only one they don't play is Overpass. I think they're bad on that map, but every other one they play. So you send them up against that level of team. Like, for instance, what if they, like, not in this major, but in another tournament, it's completely feasible they run into NIP or something. I think they beat NIP because I think they have a better map pool than NIP. Like, same thing with FaZe. I think if you run them into FaZe again in a best of 3, the way FaZe looked, the way Renegades looked, I'd probably go with Renegades. Like, it's like, I think they're a pretty good team, and so you look at the best thing about them is, like, their role balance looks perfect. Like, it's like,
it does look that way.
It's like a straw. It's like nobody looks out of place. It's not like NIP or like, okay, the only guy who looks correct in this thing is Forrest. The other 4 players are playing like all wrong roles or something. Like, it doesn't like Legro, like, yeah, you're playing technically the correct role, but you're not supposed to be an in-game leader. Dennis doesn't work. Rez, like, he's playing like harder roles, but he's fairly good. It's like, but it doesn't quite work like with Renegades though. Like, everything looks spot on.
No, I agree. I think out of all the, if I had to pick one, I think out of all the teams in the Legend stage, especially, I think they're a good buy.
Mm-hmm.
If we go by your metrics, I mean, MIBR is a weird buy because
yeah, like, I bought them anyway, but like, that's because Colt Zero's like went God mode, and if he goes God mode, everything is possible.
Exactly, but I say that's a weird buy because I mean they did place. I mean, they did go into the semifinals, so buying into them feels like, I mean, how much further?
Yeah, basically, like,
yeah.
Say they're like top 5 right now. Like, I'm buying into them as in, like, I think they're gonna be better than Navi.
Yeah,
which is like top 3.
I think so.
Maybe they're better than Liquid, top 2. That's pretty good. right? That's kind of where I bought them, but yeah,
Right.
you're not gonna get as much value out of them as you would out of Renegades. Put it that way. The other team talk about Liquid, the NA Hope. I was
NA
so
Hope.
happy. Like I don't know if I can say happy, but I was. It was so. Esports has taught me so much about the NA Hope in every single game, and it's always the same. They made it to the playoffs. They're going to win the championship. They're going to go all the way, and then they get upset by an underdog European team.
They died for Ence's dream.
Yeah, and basically, everybody who was hating on Taco after Liquid won the iBuyPower Masters tournament should turn around and apologize to Taco, because Taco is a good player, as it turned out.
Yeah, we don't need Taco. We got Stewie now.
Yeah, like
about that though.
About that, like I'm just gonna say Taco made it to that semifinals. Pretty good. No, but seriously, like Liquid has a freakish amount of skill. But their problem was like they were playing against a team that played them in team play and tactics. So, which was Ents, right? And then also Alu went God mode on Inferno, so that didn't help them much either. What did you think of Liquid?
No, I agree. I feel like at this entire event they looked. I mean, it wasn't miraculous what they did going into this. Yeah, they beat Navi, but which was still I thought a good series. But when up against Ents, it just felt like they just almost couldn't answer them. Like they were like, I know they kind of played them close. Like went to overtime in the second map.
Yeah, went to overtime.
But it still felt like Ents just always had the number.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like individually.
They just felt better prepared. Yeah, they just felt better prepared. Almost felt like Liquid was just like, we're gonna beat them anyway. I'm not saying they underestimated them, but it kind of felt like they underestimated them.
Mm-hmm. And then like Alexi B is like, yeah, we didn't have the answers at the end of Inferno, but we just went default, played our usual game, and then we won. It's like, well, what do you want me to say to that, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because like Inferno is not a good Ents map. Like it's like even though Alu himself is good on that map, the rest of the team usually isn't. So that's it was actually a good pick, I think, by Liquid to go into Inferno for Ents, but like it didn't really matter in the end. Like Ents was just a better team.
And I mean, we saw it this like even further in the Navi stage then, or against Ents is capable of. So I think in hindsight, Liquid losing to them, it's almost like you could say it's very unfortunate that they drew them. If they had been Liquid versus, I don't know, Renegades, NIP, FaZe, I feel like we see Liquid in the semifinals at least. But because of this,
but I mean, before the draw happened, and he told them you're getting Ents, they'd be like, "Oh fuck yeah!" So I don't know. I don't know about that. Like I get what you mean. Like in terms of like retrospective, like man, Ents was on a burner that tournament, but like the seeding system worked. Like Liquid basically got like one of the lower seeds technically.
No, for sure.
All right, so yeah, I guess we'll move on to the semifinals. What did you think of Navi versus Ents?
There's that funny image on Reddit where Simple was basically, up against 9. I wouldn't
9.
quite put it like that, but
I would at Mirage. At the end of Mirage, it really was 1v9.
It really was.
Like I would say for most of the tournament, but for that game, it was.
I like your tweet when you said you have that sort of like almost perverse obsession with pleasure of watching Simple being left to himself because that gets the best out of him almost.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's such a pleasure to watch his team be shit, and it forces so much more godlike moments out of him. And it's kind of, it's sad for him because like he literally plays like a god on stage, and he still loses because the rest of his team is just not pulling through for him.
Yeah, like that fucking 1v4, that impossible 1v4, he almost pulled out of his hat. It's like, what the fuck? Yeah. You literally like pulled like 3 miracles to get those first 3 kills, and you almost won the 4th kill. And that's like, but it wasn't enough. Like, what the fuck was the rest of Navi doing? Oh, right, they were all dead because they were useless. That's right. Like, the funny thing about Navi is like, it's like the counter circle jerk around them is really funny, because like everybody acknowledges the fact, like it's impossible to deny the fact that fucking Simple is godlike, but like because Navi themselves like place really highly in the results, everybody tries to convince themselves like, you know what, the other guys they did some stuff too. They're part of the team. Yeah, Zeus is a good in-game leader. Edward had a good tournament, etc., etc. But like, if you look at all the tournaments, it always comes down to the exact same moment. At the end of the day, for whatever reason, the rest of the team dies off. Maybe Flaming and Electronic don't have that good of a game, and it's all left to Simple to carry everybody to the ends of the earth.
It's the same story over and over again.
Yeah, I've seen this story before. It's called Sisyphus and the Boulder.
That's actually a pretty good analogy. Yeah. But I like the question is now, you know, like is this like, are Navi going to be like baited into believing again that their team has what it takes to win, or do they, you know?
I mean, thank God it was Ents and not like Astralis. I'll say that, because like if it was
Astralis, if it had been Astralis, I'd be like, oh yeah,
we were technically the second best. No, you lost to Ents. Right, like,
you're very right.
Like I think if like I have them on the sell list for obvious reasons, but yeah, I know Edward said, oh, there's not gonna be any changes to this team. Maybe Edward is the change. Like he's always been the most obvious choice because there's no other in-game leaders in CIS besides Zeus and Angel himself has not been looking that great recently. So like that's kind of iffy. But like basically Navi do need to make a change if they have any kind of ambitions towards world number 1. Which I don't know if they do, considering how their Dota 2 roster went.
Cold.
Listen, man, that entire I've never ranted about this that much, but I fucking hate like a part of me thinks like 50% of the reason Navi failed in Dota 2 is because all of their fans are like, it's okay, man, we always love you.
No, I agree, and like they had legitimate reasons to hold on to players and rosters for way too long, because there was almost no backlash. I mean, yeah, of course there were like, you know, people complaining, but realistically speaking, there was just like, it almost always felt like, you know what, we're fine, we're actually fine, but no, shit wasn't fine. And obviously they held on to a lot of players for like other reasons, PR, like, you know, fandom, whatever, right. Yada yada yada. But at least in Dota, they finally realized, hey, maybe they made that
move like 4 years too late. So Nico should have been the one 4 years ago.
But that's the thing. I feel like because they realized it in Dota so late, I kind of hope that it helps them realize it sooner in CS. Maybe. Yes. No.
Who knows? Man?
Who knows? But and the thing is, you can't even blame Navi that much. Like you said, like, do they even want to be like the very best, or are they okay with just like consistently placing top 4, or like top 8 or whatever?
It's gonna be real sad if that's how Simple's career ends. Yeah, this man was the greatest of all time, but how come he never won anything?
At the same time, at the same time, though, then that is also on him. If he doesn't realize, like, if he sticks to this team despite them not having any ambitions to go further, I mean, that's also on him. Then
should have jumped on MIBR when he had the chance.
Should have. Like, if he wants to be the very best, and if he wants to win titles and like puts up the major titles in his trophy case, he needs to look out what's best for him. And I just don't feel like Navi right now is the best for him.
Didn't he also sign a 3-year contract at some point?
He did. I think he did anyway.
Yeah,
that's like the rumor. Like the buyout is like really crazy, and that's why he couldn't go to MIBR. But you know.
Yeah. So yeah, that's fucked. Rest in peace, Navi. All right, the other semifinals was MIBR versus Astralis. This one, the first game was really good. Basically, MIBR almost had them on overpass, but almost doesn't count when you're up against so many fucking clutch plays from Astralis. Like, so many clutch plays from Astralis. What did you think of this series?
After the Renegade series in the Challenger stage. No, was it in the Legend stage? Sorry.
Yeah, Legend stage.
In the Legend stage, somebody tweeted out, like, you know, the moment in Infinity War when Thanos gets like
scratch of blood.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, all of this just for a drop of blood. That's what that MIBR series also felt like, similar to the Renegades one. You know, there's so much effort from MIBR, like pushing, like, oh, let's do this, and then Astralis is like, yeah, we barely won Overpass, but then they like stomp him on Inferno, like, really, all of that effort just for a little bit of blood. That's kind of what it felt like. Yeah, they played him close in Overpass, but it's also one of the best. Or to me anyway, it felt like one of MIBR's comfort picks anyway. So it's like it's almost to be expected that they play him closer on that map.
Yeah.
But it's just disgusting how far ahead Astralis is on Inferno, about like ahead of anybody else.
Yeah, because Overpass
I remember
is technically a weak map, so.
Yeah, I remember or you remember the radar bug thing, right?
Yeah.
How everybody was like, oh yeah, Astralis is totally abusing the radar to just scout players in smokes. Just kidding, they're just wrecking everybody else inside smokes anyway.
Yeah, like how many excuses do you need to make for Astralis? Like, make against Astralis? Yeah, well, nobody made the right roster changes. Everybody makes roster changes. Yeah, well, it's only because of the nuke. They go 42-10 on like Inferno. I was like, oh well, like there's so Astralis is doing such crazy shit, and like they're basically like even stronger than they were before at this major. It's been like a year now. Like they're untouchable.
They're pretty much untouchable, but I mean that's kind of like the exciting part of what's to come now, right? Like what's happening now. Like who's gonna chase them, and I think MIBR put up the best case to be like the number one Astralis sort of like Astralis hunters. Yeah. So I look forward to that.
I think MIBR is the only one. Like I think there's only three people that could legitimately do it. Fallen, Kerrigan, and MSL. MSL for obvious reasons can't do it because he's not on a good team. But like tactically speaking, he can match Glaive, and he did match Device in the op for that one freak tournament. Obviously, I'm not going to count that in my calculations, but tactically speaking, he could do it. But obviously, he's not on the right team to do it. Kerrigan, I think, can do it, but it's yet to be seen exactly what team he goes to. Fallen, with this team, I think he can get them close. I don't necessarily know if this is the right 5. It really depends on Fur. Because Fur did really good in this tournament, but I don't know if that'll continue in the following tournaments, because his 2018 was not good. It was like pretty bad. So it depends on Fur coming back to God form again. If he can do that, then yeah, you have a game. You have a ball game. But if that doesn't happen, then Astralis gonna keep swiping everybody out of existence, just snapping their fingers
for the foreseeable future, anyway. Who knows? I mean, odds are there's like going to be like another super team formed somewhere. Who knows?
There's no good super team left.
I don't think so either.
Like
so.
Yeah. I guess we'll go to the finals. Also, pretty quick series. Astralis killed the Cinderella story of Ents and then crowned themselves greatest of all time. If they weren't already.
Actually, I thought it was hilarious that. Did you see that? Did you see that? Was it that what's it called? One of the poll that Sean Garris did on his own Twitter, like, oh, you know, who's gonna win the finals, and then people legitimately thought
Ents.
There was actually Ents in the running for it.
Yeah.
Like I think going into it, I almost expected a slaughterfest, because you have to realize that Ents only got into the finals by consistently playing the best and even more than their best, and then they play the absolute best and most crucial and clutch team that will never give you an inch. And even if they do give you an inch, they will like get it back ASAP. So to me, it was I said to everybody that I knew, like, this is going to be a slaughter. I'm not even sure if it's like from a purely spectator standpoint that doesn't like necessarily understand CS that much or like enjoy CS that much, it's probably not worth watching. If you enjoy beautiful CS, then yeah, please watch Astralis be the best team and play the perfect CS. And it was beautiful to watch. But if you were there for the Cinderella story, you shouldn't have watched. It was just I feel like Ents just were shown their limits, and Astralis just proved yet again that they still have yet to be pushed across more than one map.
Like Basically, if you look at the way Ents beat Liquid and Navi, I describe it like this: they basically dragged the game into aspects of team play and tactics, and that's where they made majority of their wins. Like basically against like Liquid are playing really individually, especially at Mirage. They're taking these aggressive aim duels, and then Enk are just like naturally taking setups, playing the mid control, and then playing the trade fragging game using utility correctly, and that's why they beat out Liquid in that series mostly. Against Navi, it's the exact same thing. Like tactically, they were outplaying them. Yeah, they had good individual moments, but basically they're just beating them through their team play and structure and tactics. And like X7 in particular went really well, went like fucking crazy at times. But like you match them against Astralis, like listen, tactically speaking, I think Enks are actually better than both Navi and Liquid in terms of the tactics. In team play, they were better on those days. If that's their greatest strength, well, you're running into Astralis, which are the greatest of all time at both of those things, and they have you outgunned, and they have you out experienced, like, and they have a better map pool. It's like how many there are no win conditions here. Like I could at least give you win conditions for like the Cloud9 versus FaZe Boston one, whereas like both of you play in a very aggressive individualistic style. So technically speaking, if by some miracle your Cloud9 players play above the bar, that takes away FaZe's win condition, and that's basically what happened, right? But like Enk's win condition, you can't play above the bar because like even if you did play above the bar, that's still not enough to play against Astralis because it's team play and tactics. Like you can't like all of a sudden level that up. Individually speaking, people have spikes in form. Team play and tactics, doesn't quite work like that.
Exactly, and that's why I think there's never going to be like a short term like solution to Astralis unless there's like a huge upset or disruption in Astralis itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there needs to be another team born out of like long years of like, or not long years, but like there needs to be a grind. Like you can't just like put 5 players together and hope for the best, even if you are FaZe or even if you are like the best players individually in the world. Like you can't just like suddenly put Simple into MIBR, put all of Meister in there and hope for the best. Like odds are, yes, there will be a map where you completely outfrag them, but again, Astralis like have such a deep map pool, and they will always out-strategize you, like you said. So that's why I think like long term, I think MIBR is the only one, maybe Liquid, that can come close to like beating them in that sense. But Liquid right now, I don't think that Stewie was the solution to them, so I don't really rate them highly either.
Like I think
MIBR,
I don't think he was like half a solution. I actually think they needed Taco and Stewie, but they lost Taco and got Stewie's. Like,
exactly, and
Taco's like such a solution there.
Taco's such a key component. I think the only reason why MIBR is like the team to beat them right now is because they just formed, but at the same time they've played together before, so they don't really have to catch up a lot on that end. So I feel like MIBR is the closest that we can probably get this year to a team beating them at the next major.
Yeah, or just in general, like yeah. But the problem with MIBR, of course, is like maybe they have a good matchup against Astralis, like they did last year at the end, kind of. But that doesn't mean they could beat everybody else. Like we still have yet to see that. Like especially against like Navi, fucking Simple's a god. So, like, yeah. I think about wraps it up for my thoughts about this major. You have anything else you want to say about it?
Nah, pretty much. I would say that I really enjoyed the event itself. I think ESL did actually a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Like I almost can't point. I actually can't point to anything that I would say was negative about this event.
Yeah.
And that's kind of rare because I mean, if we look back on the last one,
you can point to everything negative throughout the entire event.
Exactly. I guess actually, I did miss a couple of people maybe on like the panelist desk here and there, but generally speaking, I think this was a fantastic event. They had like even like 2 hosts, so like I don't know, like ESL just like that was just a great major.
Yeah.
And I hope the next one is also going to be great. I know I think Starlighter is an excellent choice for a major host because they've been grinding really hard in their major, like their events. Like they were one of the first ones actually to do like best of 3 double elim, for example, I think, in CS.
Yeah, in CSGO, they're like one of the original 3, them, DreamHack, ESL.
I mean, in Dota too, right? They've been running Dota events since like 2011 or whatever. Like
Yeah, so
they've
like
been
they're one of the OGs of TOs.
exactly, and I am kind of happy for them that they're going to do it, but I also hope that they're not going to fuck it up because it's Germany, and I
I mean,
hope that it's going to run smoothly.
they've almost never fucked up an event like in recent times I can think of.
No, not in recent times, but there've definitely been a few occasions where it's like been a little bit iffy. But ever since they've sort of like partnered with Imba TV, it's been a little bit smoother. So I look forward to that event. But no, my thoughts on this major is like cool event, really cool event. I hope that we keep the whole format and seating system.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what I do criticize about the seating system is that, as far as I know, teams were given time to submit their seatings.
So you think
you could have colluded? You could have 100% colluded. You could have said, you know what? Let's put all of these teams into the lower 8.
Fuck us, draw.
Let's make focus. Well, obviously that would.
But nobody would ever do that because then they'd be fucking themselves.
I know. I think they're like, this is just a very theory, but I just don't think you should ever give room to collusion like that. I think the votes should have been submitted like in a room.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, you obviously could have you could have like talked about it. Yeah. But no, that's the only thing I could really think of that rubbed me the wrong way.
All right, sounds good. See you guys later.